Welcome back to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you've joined myself and Matt and Diane as we restlessly seek the face of Christ in today's crazy and mixed up world. And, statistics keep coming out more and more that young adults are very stressed and very anxious. I don't know if you put yourself in that category.
No.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why is that the world expects a lot from us.
Yeah.
Especially you really kind of like to bring your A game 24/7, and that's hard, and not a whole lot of room for error, especially at your job, with a boyfriend or girlfriend. Gosh, what are some of the expectations that you think are on you? Because that's what our topic is today, is like the expectations that the world, that dating, family, work puts on us, and whether they are realistic or unrealistic, and how do we deal with those expectations?
I mean, the one that's currently on my mind is really balancing two expectations. So balancing the expectations of work, right? Which is obviously like you're expected to work hard, as you should. Like, I mean, maybe that's the first thing we should say, which is expectations aren't always bad. Like there's a negative connotation to expectations sometimes of like, I don't know, you're asking too much of me, but also we need to ask something of people. Yeah. We can't just ask nothing of people. Nothing would get done. Right. So balancing work expectations versus like balancing family expectations, so like, how do you make things work? And that's because
because you work for Veritas Catholic Network.
Yes, yes.
So you must be torn.
So I run the risk of,
you're working for God.
Yeah, I was gonna say offending my boss on the podcast. but yes, certainly. I mean,
but it's also weird hours, right?
Right,
We're
right.
I mean, at 7 p.m. and you could be home with your son.
Right. I mean, I worked 8 to 2, and now I'm working. Well, I got here at 6:45 till when we leave. So like what, 9-ish, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 8:30, 8:45, something like that.
Sure.
Hopefully that equals 8 hours since I just gave away numbers. But that's the point. You paid. No, but you know what I mean? That's my point, where it's like, that is really, and there was like a brief period. I'm just covering my bases. There was a brief period of time between 4:30 and 5, but, like balancing the expectations of work with like, well, how much time did I spend with my son today?
Yeah. I
actually was asking my wife that on the way out the door today, of like, I wonder if I hit 90 minutes, because like if I'm working, I'm the audio engineer, right? So like I'm usually editing audio, so it doesn't exactly work to have a crying baby in the background. But you know what I mean? So like,
yeah.
And I think really, cause like, let's be honest. The expectation that really needs to be met is my wife with him. How much time did she spend with him today? That's huge. So anyway, those are the expectations I'm juggling.
Sure.
Right now.
Sure. That's pulling in lots of different directions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's similar for me. Obviously, I'm not married. I don't have any kids, but so it's certainly a challenge because I see that in my, both of my brothers who are parents as well, who are working kind of intense jobs. We all work at public accounting firms, so that's, just notoriously very long hours. You've got projects and deadlines constantly, and it's a lot of, type A personalities. So everyone wants things, done to high quality. I mean, obviously there's liability too if we don't get things right, so there's the pressure of just doing, not only getting it done, but doing it well and, performing to like meeting our clients' expectations, and not just, satisfactory, but, they can choose other people to perform their audits, to do the consulting, whatever it is. So, there's the pressure, I think, from work and the intensity, and also just the sort of expectation that you're on your game at all hours, that you're available. I'm constantly checking my work email,
Do they call you or email you?
Yeah,
I mean, after hours?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think that there's a respect in our group. Like, I've had to set boundaries. For example, I try, like, unless it's an absolute emergency and the project will not get done, I don't work on Sundays, and I've told my group that, and they respect it. So, there's certainly those boundaries. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, especially during busy season when things have to get done by a certain date, I mean, it doesn't matter what hour it doesn't matter what hour it is.
Right.
There are plenty of working moms in my group, so they might take a break at like
Right.
5 o'clock to 7 o'clock to get the kids fed and
Right,
asleep
right.
and everything.
Wow. How are you mom and working those hours?
It's
Yeah, that's one thing that obviously into the future, I would be concerned about. Like I think
Yeah.
it comes back to balancing family life and work life. But if your work is so intense, I think it's very easy to lose sight of what's important for eternity, which is like the relationships, obviously, that we
Right.
have this child and
Yeah, I
the
mean,
child needs care,
this kid's only
attention.
2 years old once.
Right.
You got to take advantage
I
of
mean,
that.
Yeah.
it's interesting because like, so this has been at the forefront of my mind because I was listening to a podcast with Renee, the Lila Rose podcast, Lila Rose Live Action. If you've never heard of Live Action,
Oh, yeah.
you should
Yeah.
because
Very
they're
good
doing.
work.
Oh yeah. Shout out Lila Rose. Maybe she'll shout us out back. But but the point is,
In that case, shout out Father Mike Schmidt.
yeah,
What's up, man?
and Father Mark Mary and
Godsplaining.
right. But the point is, the woman she just interviewed, her name's escaping me. I'm not even gonna try. She is a psychoanalyst who focuses in on the amount of time that children spend with their mothers,
Mhm.
right? So this is why this is like at the very forefront of my mind. We started watching this yesterday,
Mm.
but like an interesting point that came up was that, she was quoting another psychoanalyst who has done research throughout the world and how in the Eastern world, babies, and this is changing, unfortunately, they're becoming more Western in this sense, babies will, like moms will literally hold their babies, obviously putting them down occasionally, but like for a year. You know what I mean? Like that is like they strap them on. That is the
Yeah.
baby's position for their first year of life. And they were then comparing that to like mothers and the mothers who will put their child in daycare by like week 6.
Yeah.
And the impact that has. So, I mean, it's interesting because the where I want to steer it is that's an expectation that like you can't drop the ball on that. Meaning like mother to son, mother to daughter. Like that's the thing you can't drop the ball on, and so it becomes a question of juggling expectations. But as a single person right now, right? Do you find that these high expectations at work push you to grow in virtue, or do you find that they're a hindrance to growing in virtue?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it can take away from what's important. I think that
Right.
when you become so it's such an intense environment. These people are so serious about their careers, and I mean, I do love the people that I work with, but I find that if you get caught up in that, I mean, sometimes I look at, some of the coworkers and just people in general. They're so smart, they're so brilliant, they're so passionate about their work, but I wonder if all of the effort is going into the wrong place and that sacrifices are being made, in order to
Right.
progress your career. And as a result of that, like we're not giving importance to the only things that are going to have,
Right.
weight and value for eternity.
Right.
Now, are these expectations, are they spoken or unspoken? Particularly with work, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously, I think
Yeah, no, not
your
everybody's
vocation
parent, right?
in marriage would be one,
Yeah, spoken.
probably very clearly spoken, right? Nat, why aren't you home for dinner?
Right, right.
Right? But
Yeah.
It's not
do you, I
spoken.
mean, do you feel
Whole
the
separate
pressure
problem.
from your boss, like, oh, if you're not here in enough time, or is it just kind of like that's just the culture in which you
I
work?
think at a sort of a fast-paced firm, it is a lot of the expectations are unspoken because I mean, ultimately you are rated every year and your compensation is based on your ratings.
Wow.
So, and you're compared to your peers. So if your peers are working, 100 hours a week, then, if you're doing 80, then I mean,
You do 80 hours a week?
during busy season, it could be up to 80 hours. So,
Holy moly.
and like it's hard enough to balance that, like as a single, but even as being a single person, I mean, regardless of whether you have a family or not, some of those things can be unhealthy. And then it's like personality wise, if you're a perfectionist, for example, which I tend to be
Mhm.
in my work. I always want to do, I like really can't do less than my best. I have to always give 100% to whatever I'm doing in whatever facet of my life.
Mhm.
But that can add additional stress if you can't sort of like let things go and, you overthink situations and, you know, yeah, it just adds to the stress and the anxiety and you're spending more time.
Yeah. I feel pressure too. I'll be honest, as a priest, on a
Mm.
couple of levels. One is the response time to emails or phone
Okay.
calls and things.
Yeah.
If you don't do it immediately. And I'll be honest with you, priests are really notoriously bad at not getting back to emails and phone calls, and it's very frustrating for me as a priest, even calling my brother priests and not hearing back from them sometimes at all,
Mhm.
just echoing into cyberspace.
Hmm.
And I get it, we do have a lot, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
But still, nonetheless, you know.
Yeah, if Paul were here, he would be talking about the 48-hour courtesy window.
Oh,
I feel like he's talked about that on a prior episode.
maybe you did. I don't recall. Yeah.
But I mean, I imagine. So I think I participate in an expectation that you like have, or like a pressure that you probably also feel. Although to a lesser extent, right? I can't like offer people the sacraments, right? So my role is somewhat limited. But do you feel a pressure to bring souls to Christ? Do you think that it's a healthy pressure? Do you think it's an unhealthy pressure? Like what does that look like?
I do struggle, and I think probably any good priest will struggle with just the kind of the terror, not terror. Terror is too strong a word, but the trembling of knowing that I'm going to have to stand before Jesus Christ and give him an account of these souls.
Oh my gosh.
And that makes me tremble because, one sharp word could drive a soul away from Christ. If I don't listen to the promptings of the Holy Spirit and speak this word in a homily versus perhaps an easier message, then that could, be because the hard thing is working with souls, unlike working with numbers, is an art, not a science.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day whether or not you did your numbers right.
Right.
I don't know at the end of the day whether or
Yeah.
not I made any impact on souls whatsoever. And a lot of times in God's economy, what looks like a total failure is actually the greatest success.
Right.
But conversely, if I run an event and nobody shows up, that's also, also a failure too. Let's be honest, right? But it's not, of course, because if you're doing what God wants you to do, He'll make it fruitful in whatever way He wants, whether it's
Right.
virtue in me or something.
Right.
But I do trust. I have to trust that God is merciful at the end of the day. But I do realize the burden, and I think any good priest does realize the burden.
I mean, I think that so that's why I say like I recognize a distinct way it affects you and your brother priest.
But it must affect parents in the same way, though.
Oh.
Because you probably think like, I got 18 years to form this soul for eternity.
I know.
Obviously longer too. Your influence,
Well,
God
yeah,
willing, but still, like,
I mean, they say that 90% of your time with your child is prior to 18.
I believe it. Yeah,
So, like,
I believe it.
18 years, that's not an overstatement. Like you really do have a limited time to, I mean, God willing, right? If you even have that long.
Yeah. And you must wonder sometimes. I mean, your son is what, 2?
No, one
and a half.
under one. Yeah.
Under one. He's not 1 year old.
Almost one.
Almost one.
Nearly
Almost one.
there.
So he's not yet at the age where you have to really make some tough decisions. Like, do I
Right.
fight this battle? Do I let them listen to the bad music, or
Right.
have those friends that are a little sketchy because I just don't want to fight another battle
Right.
in the house, or what do I let slip? What do I hound on? How far do I push faith down his throat?
Right.
if
I
he's-
mean, and there have been, just from talking to people who have, in my opinion, probably like that have done a good job and are good evangelists, picking the battles is important, and then just being prudent is important. So like,
Yeah.
realizing this is a side, conversation,
But important one, I think.
Yeah. So like, I heard a story from Sean Forrest. You know Sean Forrest?
I do.
Yeah.
He used to do confirmation retreats.
He actually
in
did my
Connecticut.
confirmation
Oh,
retreat.
did he really?
Yeah. It was
He's a musician. Look him up on YouTube. Pretty
Yeah.
cool guy.
And he shared that he was at a Steubenville conference. He's spoken at a whole bunch of them. And there was a woman who came up to him and was like, "This is my son's 5th Steubenville conference." and he turned to the kid and was like, "Are you having fun?" And the kid was like, "Not really." And so he actually turned to the mother and said, like, "Bring him on a mission trip. He's heard it before. Bring him on a mission trip and let him put it into action." And so it's interesting because like that's something I hadn't really thought about, and as someone I've never been on a mission trip actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, the closest I got was like freshman year of college. I went to a Christian school. They brought us to a local, underfunded elementary school. We did their like basically yard work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is this close to counting.
Stuff
by this close, I mean
stuff that the government should be paying for anyway.
Not really counting,
Yeah.
But the point is that like it made me think like, oh, that's something that I should do, and then should make sure that I, do with my son.
Yeah, definitely.
Like that's and then the expectation is right.
But I think that's an important thing
Yeah.
when you're parenting is you have to know the heart of your child, right?
Sure.
Because there are kids who've gone to 5 student meal conferences and love every minute.
Right.
But
Yeah.
obviously this mom was having a big miss because she knew student meal conferences were good objectively, and they
Right.
are.
And they are, of course they are.
But
I'm
clearly,
wearing a Franciscan shirt.
Right. But her son was not. It wasn't resonating with her son in the same way, and so there was this total disconnect.
Right.
And that's certainly the case that I find as a pastor is the necessity to connect on a deep level with my flock. Like, I mean, I could easily just start the traditional Latin Mass in my parish, but I think that would be a total disconnect at this point with
Right.
them. Maybe we're working towards that, but
So it's really then the question is like, what is the expectation of holiness from people?
yeah. But it's prudence. You have to have
Well, it's prudence, and I think also what you guys are talking about is surrender is important too, right? Because
Right.
you can come in with these expectations, and I'm just thinking particularly about dating, and it's sometimes it's difficult to know what the line is between a good expectation and an unrealistic expectation, right? Because we don't want to settle.
Right.
And God is not in the business of having us settle, but at the same time, my standards sometimes can be so high that you wonder, am I holding and grasping onto my own will so much that I can't let God, kind of show me what
Right.
his will is
Right,
for
do
my
his thing.
life?
So-
Like that openness, what you're talking about of the parent who doesn't see like, oh, this is a good thing. Yes, it's an objectively good thing to go to a student meal conference, but maybe it's not the right thing for your
kid,
child. And you
right.
have to be open to that. Otherwise, I think there's the risk that you miss out on what God actually has for you or the things that he's trying to teach you. At least that's been a lesson in my own life, sort of, and having some of those unrealistic
So let's go to that, because I think that's one other area where a lot of young adults feel the expectations is in the dating world.
Mm-hmm.
And as a married man, as a woman who's been in dating, first of all, do you feel like young adults have too high of an expectation? What expectations do you think they have, and do you think your expectations are too high?
Wow, I mean, okay, so
I know you found the perfect wife.
yeah,
but it's kind of
and let me tell you, perfect. She's perfect in every way. Never sins. No,
you
but
can't marry our blessed mother. She's taken. I'm sorry.
When we started dating, I was pre-reversion to the Catholic faith, and Renee was Protestant.
How did you guys meet and fall in love?
We met in New York City, and
At a bar?
No,
Good, okay,
no.
good.
We were
That's
in
good.
a class together, and I know it's corny. I loved her instantly, like immediately, and she was super dating someone else.
You're right. That's corny.
Yeah. It's like every rom-com movie in history. Of course, the way it really went then was we were friends. And then we left that study abroad in New York City, study abroad in air quotes, because I was like 45 minutes from home, and remained friends over the summer. We went back to Nashville. She had broken up with her boyfriend at this point. And so we started dating. But that's where the expectations comes in, which is like, she had a very good expectation, which was like, I will date Christians. And I remember pulling her into a music room, because I was a music major, and being like, this is a song I wrote. How I used to be a Christian. No, I'm not. And she was like, actually, my faith is really important to me. And I was like, oh, crap.
Oh, you just lost out on the most
It's like,
beautiful
dang
woman.
it.
in all of-
Right. And so the point was like, I mean, providentially, it gave me the kick in the butt I needed, to like actually pick up a Bible and then listen to some apologetics, and so I had this massive reversion to faith, but then I had this in my opinion, not unnecessary, that's the wrong word. I had too lofty of an expectation because I reverted back to my Catholic faith, and she was a Protestant, and I was like gonna beat her over the head with Catholicism and be like, see, I'm right, you know? And then after like 3 months, she was like, if you don't stop bringing this up, I will never consider it. So stop bringing it up. We'll talk about it if I want to talk about it. She was like, I promise I'm thinking about it, you know, like that, which all credit to her that she had the courage, because I really think there's so much courage that is required of a convert.
Yeah.
Right. So the point is that, like, what were the expectations? Well, I think the too lofty expectation. I don't think it's a bad expectation to want to date a Catholic. I mean, I think that's a great move. And to be fair, like, we did not get engaged until she had become a Catholic.
Right.
You know? But she was Protestant for the first, I think, 2 years of us being together.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And it was an unfair expectation for me to think, like, I'm just so convinced of this that she should just bend to, you know, my opinion.
So it's interesting to me that you fell in love at first sight, you know, because that means almost that, like, you had very few expectations, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that, you know, she was very,
it was
very attractive, and well, I mean, I know a lot of people who say, well, you have to, you know, have an excellent job. You have to be, you know, wealthy, or enjoy all the same things I enjoy. I mean, my sister, when she was trying to debate whether or not to marry her current husband, one of the objections she said was, well, he doesn't have a sexy job.
A sexy job,
right? Because he's an accountant. No offense to the accountant in the room, but both my parents and myself were like, wait. He's going to provide for your family in a stable manner. I don't care if he's a stunt man or whether he's an accountant. Like, who needs you're not the one doing the job, right? He is. Like,
right.
She wanted like an FBI agent or something like really fun.
Yeah.
Like, no, cross that off your list. Okay. That's not, it should not be on
unrealistic expectation.
That's an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, when we had started dating, we were praying together, you know? So, like, as I grew in my faith, the expectation rose, you know? And like I said, I do think that wanting, like, saying I'm going to date Catholics, I think that's a totally solid move. You know, it happened to work out for us. Like, God clearly was involved. You know what I mean? We're still both converting to the faith in a sense.
Thank goodness. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversions happen because of the spouse. So there's that element, but missionary dating is always a dangerous thing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think God has to call you to that. But I mean, you can have, I struggle with, I think, what we were talking about earlier about sort of this ideal of, especially as being a female, you know, you want to, and it's very necessary to spend time with your children. And we live in a very expensive part of the country, very expensive. And so, you know, dating is difficult in the sense of, it is important, I think. I mean, I'm very driven, so I'm attracted to that sort of personality, just someone who is kind of a go-getter and, you know, things like that. Having a good job is not nothing. I think it is important, you know?
You just
and
provide
so,
for your family.
Yeah. And maybe that's where my expectations get slightly unrealistic, you know, in terms of, okay, like...
Well, you can just be the breadwinner in the house.
Yeah, but that goes back to the mother not spending time with the children, you know? So it's hard to... So, and that's where I think I struggle the most of figuring out, you know, are my expectations too high? And, you know, like, that's
what
what
are
maybe
your
I
expectations?
that I could stay at home with children.
Right, yeah.
But that just does not seem possible in the dating world that I've been immersed in, you know, based on my experience. And, you know, you have to be attracted to the person as well, have common interests, things like that.
Sense of humor.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be with this person for the rest of your life, right?
Sure.
So you're not just getting married for the sake of getting married. I could have done that years ago.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, Renee really lucked out with my tremendous sense of humor.
Yeah. And your dashing good looks, I'm sure. But,
yeah. But as for the staying, if the expectation is that you want to be able to stay home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that from personal experience, you know, some of the decisions Renee and I have made, we would have never been able to make prior to being married for a year.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, like, and I mean in the sense that, like, when we met, I was a commercial songwriting major pursuing a career in music, you know, who then went on to have, like, a brief stint as a gym teacher, get a like co-teach with Father Joseph as I get a master's in theology.
Yeah, that was
and then
pretty awesome.
and then like by providence ended up in Catholic radio where I'm using that audio engineering I learned in college and that master's in theology that I'm in the process of getting. So but like there was no way we could have
you couldn't have
possibly
seen that, right?
predicted this path.
Yeah. And that's where I think the unrealistic expectations come in, because I and others tend to get way too far ahead if they get 12 steps ahead. And it's like you do have to sort of have that flexibility and surrender to figure it out kind of as you go along. But praying, obviously, I do think that gut feelings, if you're praying and you're in a state of grace, you can listen to that's one thing that I've learned just of being able to say no to people and just like the peace and anxiety that you
gotta
feel
listen
are
to your
signs.
Conscience.
Yeah.
Right. Gotta listen to your conscience. And if the conscience really is, like Newman says, the aboriginal voice of Christ, it's not like your conscience can tell the future, but like your conscience can give you a legitimate sign,
Sure.
And so
I think there's one other element about expectations that I'd like to kind of bring up, and that is I think there's a great mercy in loving without expectations in many respects.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, like, for example, let's say, for example, because this happened to me this year, I had a major birthday, turned a number.
A number.
Yeah.
We won't mention
Still a restless Catholic young adult, though.
I'm still a restless Catholic. I don't think I'm in the young adult category anymore. I turned 40. Okay, I turned 40. I guess on air it was okay. I think priests get a pass in the young adult show.
Oh, for sure.
You're still young, Father.
Yeah.
But
you don't look a day over 39. Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
When you're 50, you're gonna look back and be like, "Oh, I was such an idiot for saying that."
See, make it that far. But on a significant birthday, one would think like, "Oh gosh, my family should reach out," and as more than like a quick text or something. But it was a quick text from one of my siblings. One sibling did send a card. One sibling totally ignored me. Oof. Actually, no, two siblings totally ignored me. Right. But I'm coming to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to love without expectation. I'm not going to expect them to do anything, because obviously it's different. If you're dating, you should have expectations, or if you're a boss at work, you should have expectations for your employees. But I think it's a great gift to be able to love without putting expectations on others. And even when you are a CEO or some manager at a company, to make sure your expectations are human.
Yeah, to see the person, the dignity of the person. Yeah, that's
so
true.
If somebody needs time off because their child is sick, I mean, like, to say, oh, well, we got this big project coming up. I mean, that's kind of an unrealistic expectation. I think we can really be great acts of mercy to just go without putting that. I don't know.
I mean, and that's
a good point.
I mean, so let me ask you this. Is that the way Christ loves, without expectation? Because
no.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say, because the rich young man comes to him, Matthew 19, and says, what do I need to, he doesn't say get to heaven, right? What do I need to do to get to heaven? What do I need to get eternal life? And Jesus instructs him to follow the commandments. Yeah. So that's an expectation.
Sure.
Right. So, how do I combine these two of loving without expectation and also, Christ's instruction?
Well, I think what love is to will the good of the other, right? So when Christ said follow the commandments, it was because it was for that man's good that the commandments were followed. For me, in the case I brought up, like, it would really just be for my own ego to receive these cards or whatever from my siblings. And it's more like for their greater good, I should have mercy and say, you know what, maybe they're busy that day. Maybe they had other stuff going on. Maybe it wasn't an insult at me. It was just kind of like, it's not.
And if it was an insult at you, then like, guess what? You gotta love them.
I'm still gonna love them anyway. Right? Exactly. I mean, love your family, even your friends, neighbors, whatever.
Yeah. Opportunity to work on virtue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the important thing to pull out of that then also is that all this advice is, I mean, obviously maybe, but all this advice is for individual situations. Like, it has to be applied to whatever particular situation anyone's in.
Yeah. But let's go to one point that you said about expectations from God. Do you, in your spiritual life, feel like God puts expectations on you? And do you feel like they're sometimes overwhelming? I mean, obviously, God would not expect us to truly do something that's impossible, but
yes, the answer to that question is yes. The reason it's yes is because I just took a moral theology class. And so I've spent a lot of time in the last several weeks, like digging into how to evaluate, decisions.
Mm.
And that, like, that verse that I just mentioned has been a central part of the class. Like, we've been basing a lot of the class off of, well, what did Jesus say to the rich young man? You have to follow the commandments.
Yeah.
Well,
John Paul II writes this whole encyclical Veritatis Splendor,
which we've been
from
reading.
that passage.
Right, exactly. And so expectations, absolutely. But another thing that, I mean, it's a great thing. This is why Franciscan's a great school.
My alma mater. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Diane hates them though. but the point is that also a huge piece of the class is not just, well, you have to follow the commandments. It's like, what's the point of the Beatitudes? The Beatitudes are to help you grow in virtue. You know, so the expectation not of just follow the commandments, but be perfect like my heavenly Father is perfect.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It means maturing in the Christian life and growing in virtue. And the way you do that is by keep choosing virtue every time.
Yeah.
You know? And so, like, it is a huge expectation. But then there's the beauty of, like, well, the new law is an infused law, which means that God doesn't just, like, kick the door open and, like, push you through it and be like, go grow in virtue. You know, he actually,
with the grace, he gives
you the grace, right?
Yeah.
You know, so, like, it's both this situation of expectation, but also like God's holding my hand while I do it.
But it's easy to feel in our spiritual life like I'm not living up to God's expectation.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Course, you know?
Yeah. And I think those expectations, maybe they present themselves in just the circumstances of your life, right? The sufferings that come by, and you have the opportunity to kind of, you know, to work on virtue, or to, you know, like, I mean, there's the vice that we need to root out. So I feel like God is consistently calling us through the the trials of everyday life, you know, the mundane moments. How are we going to react to them? Are we going to do, you know, all of our tasks and, you know, obligations for love of God? You know, like, there's so many ways that you can approach it, right? Of just not doing it because I need to get it done, but doing it, you know, for the love of God, for others, making an offering of the day for souls. Just so many ways that we can grow. I think invitations and maybe where you start to feel those expectations is when you fall short of, you know, the ways that, oh, I had an opportunity here, and, you know, like, or the suffering that I'm not fully embracing as, like, you know, it's God's permissive will, whether it's his permissive will, his actual will, whatever, reactions to that.
You know, I think in our world, which has so many high expectations of people, and kind of going back to what I was saying about the family, there's so few people that love us truly unconditionally. Because there's a lot of conditions on our love. You know, I'll love you if you're good at what you do at work. I'll love you and respect you. And I think we project that onto God a lot, because we've often never experienced a true unconditional love where there's where there's, like, maybe not no expectations. I mean, Christ obviously wants us to grow, but that the love will continue even if we don't meet the expectations.
Right.
Yeah, that he doesn't get tired of us, that we just get tired of asking, you know, for his mercy and his help. Yeah. It's hard, though, you know, because we don't experience that true unconditional love.
A lot of times. Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's ultimately, right? Like, that's what everyone's vocation is. It's like emulating that unconditional love in whatever the particular situation is.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it's with Renee and my son. For you, it's with your flock, you know, and for you, it's with your coworkers and us, of course.
Yeah. It takes a lot of unconditional love to love Matt.
I mean, you don't have to
be in the same
me.
room.
It is unconditional right now.
Yeah. No doubt.
But, well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Restless. You know, if you have expectations laid upon you, lay them upon the Lord, you know, and trust in him, and continue to strive to the best of your ability just to be the best son or daughter, mother, father, worker, friend that you can possibly be, knowing that his grace is alive in your heart. And at the same time, offer to people around you the gift of an unconditional love, the gift of a love without expectations, because our Lord has expectations insofar as he wants us to be the best that we can possibly be, but also his love is endless even when we do fall short.